Hey there, my name is Charlie Ray, and in this video I'll be demoing a few of the new Luxe Lens wedding actions. And in this video I really want to emphasize how quickly you can get great results using these Luxe actions to enhance your wedding images. So here's our first image, and in this image I just kind of want to boost the color, really help the couple stand out from the background, and bring in some of these. We've got some great colors here, some reds and greens and yellows. Just really emphasize all of that. So the first action I'm going to use is the Beaming Bride action. I'm just going to hit play on that. And as you can see, that brightened things up, gave our highlights just a little bit of a glow. I think that's just a little bit heavier than I like, so I'm going to adjust the opacity here down to 25%. So you can see kind of a before and after, just brightens and lightens everything up just a little bit. So the second action I want to run on this is the Cinemachrome action. And you can see that kind of tweaks the color palette just a little bit, brings out some nice pinks here in the flowers and in the skin tones. It just really brought out a bit of that color in the background like we wanted. So right now I feel like we've got a little bit of dark areas and some light areas that are a little bit hot. So I'm going to run the even exposure action, and that's just going to kind of bring the two together. And once again, I feel like that effect is a little bit too heavy, so I'm just going to adjust the opacity on that one as well. We'll bring that down to about 20%, just going to help lower the contrast, kind of bring our highlights and shadows together a bit. So I still want to really bring out all this great color behind them and help them pop out even more. So I'm actually going to use the Pop Flowers action on this. Even though it's technically not flowers, it still works great. So it didn't do anything right off the bat, as you can see. That's because it gave us a blank mask down here. So I'm going to paint with white on that mask, and wherever I paint, it's going to bring in the effect. So I just really want to bring in all that color, help bring in some saturation and life into those colors. And as I get closer to the models here, I'm going to go to a smaller brush just so I don't go across their skin or affect any of the colors that I don't want to, or make them too saturated in there. Just going to come in there, right in between them. Same down in here just a little bit. And I think that looks great. Once again, just a little bit heavy, so I'm going to drop that down from 100% opacity down to 70%. You can kind of see before and after, really bringing out that great color we have in the background. So the next action I'm going to add is Summer Vows, and I'm going to use that to really bring in some warmth and rich color into our foliage in the front here that's got some great brown warm tones already. So that goes across the entire image when you first run it. I don't want that, so I'm just going to hit Command I or Windows I if you're on a PC to invert the mask. So now that we're on a blank mask, I'm going to use white again just to paint in down here, just to bring a little bit of that warmth into those foreground plants. You can see not a huge effect, just kind of grounds the couple, brings some color into the foreground so it doesn't stand out so much from the background. The very last action I'm going to add is the Whiten Dress action. We've got just a little bit of a bluish tint in here where it should be white. And once again, it starts with a blank mask, so I'm just going to paint with white wherever I want that to take place. And you can see it's just toning down those colors, bringing our dress back to be more of a neutral color. And then it also comes with these two layers you can turn off or on if you want to brighten the dress, or if you've got, white dresses are difficult to photograph sometimes, so if it's a little too bright, you can also darken it down with this other layer. I think it looks pretty good as it is, so I'm going to leave both of those turned off. And as you can see, with 6 quick actions and a little bit of masking, I think we've really transformed this image, brought it to life, brought out a lot of that great fall color, and our models are really standing out from the background there. So I'm going to move on to our second image here. Alright, so here in our second image you can see it's a little more dramatic, a little more kind of conceptual, editorial than our first image was. So I'm going to kind of play with that, amp up the drama a little bit, and just have some fun here. So the first thing I notice is that my shadows are really, really dark, and our highlights are pretty hot. So I really want to even that out, give myself a good starting place. So I'm going to use the Open Shadows action. And that should really give me more detail in my shadows, a much more even image to work with, and just a better place to start. So like I say, to amp up that drama, give it a little more interest, I'm going to run the Painted Details action. And just a quick note on this action, it is meant for a full resolution image. So if you've already cropped your image down, or you're working with a web resolution image, or something meant for the internet, it might look super, super crazy. So in that case, I would recommend using the Painted Details custom action. It just gives you a pop-up and lets you adjust how intense the effect is going to be to match your image. So that looks great. You can see we've got kind of the brush strokes, the stylized look. The only place I'm not a fan of it is here in the flowers. It's looking a little bit crazy. And then obviously here in her face, her skin, that doesn't look so great either. So I'm going to mask this out in those areas. So I'm going to switch to a black brush, 100% opacity there, and I'm just going to brush away the effect on her skin. Just bring her back to normal before we ran the action here. And then also here in the veil, just to keep that mesh detail. And then for the flowers, I like the effect. It's just a little too strong, so I'm going to drop down to 50% opacity. Just brush across those, just to tone it down a little bit. Same thing there. Perfect. So our third action I'm going to run here is Beaming Bride. And with that action, you can see it brightened everything up. I'm not a huge fan of it down here since we've already got some pretty heavy highlights. So once again, I'm going to hit Command-I or Windows-I in order to invert that mask, and it's going to start us fresh with no effect. I'm going to bring my opacity back up to 100%. And I just want to use this action to accentuate the light that's coming in through the window. So I'm just going to paint it in up here, kind of along the top of our image, just to add a little bit more effect, like our light's really streaming in, coming through those window slats. Maybe I'll bring it in from here down into the shadows just a little bit. And then unmask here in the highlights just to make sure I don't get any extra brightness where I don't want it. So overall, I think this is looking great. The one thing I'm noticing is that through these actions, we pulled out some saturation, and it was already kind of unsaturated at the beginning. And I just want to bring a little bit more life back into it. So I'm going to come down here to the polish. These are kind of the final details that I usually add to an image, and I'm just going to run the boost saturation. That's just going to add a little bit more pop, a little bit more life back into it, especially here in the skin. And I might actually run that again, and then Command-I or Windows-I in order to invert that mask, and then just paint it in here on the skin where we're kind of looking a little bit gray. So once again with a white brush, just to paint that in. That's just going to add a little bit more life into those areas of the skin that are going a little bit gray. And I'm happy with this image. I think we really brought out kind of the texture, the layering in her dress, especially with that painted details. Really brought out the highlights and shadows there. Gave it some interest in a more stylized look, which I think matches the dramatic lighting and dramatic effects. I hope you guys really have fun with this action set, and I'm looking forward to see what you guys come up with using it.